Inside Windsor Castle, while the world believed everything was polished, peaceful, and perfectly under control, something explosive was already moving through those ancient halls like a whisper no one could stop. No trumpets, no announcement, no cameras, just silence. The kind of silence that usually means power is changing hands behind closed doors. And at the center of it all stood Prince William and Princess Anne, two figures not known for drama but for discipline. That is what made it terrifying. Because when emotional people move, chaos follows. But when calm people move with purpose, history gets rewritten.
The ability to have somebody who is kind of epitomizes what you think your country stands for has always been a major ambition.
From the outside, Windsor Castle looked frozen in tradition. Guards stood still, schedules rolled on, smiles remained practiced. But beneath that polished royal surface, a cold operation was unfolding with such precision it almost looked invisible. Every corridor, every calendar slot, every approval, every access point had reportedly been aligned long before anyone noticed something was wrong. This was not some sudden burst of revenge or emotional rebellion. No, that would have been messy. This was cleaner than that, smarter than that, slower than that, and far more dangerous. Prince William was no longer the grieving boy the world pitied in 1997. He was no longer just Diana's son walking behind a coffin while millions cried. He had become something else entirely, a future king who understood one brutal truth. In royal life, emotions are ignored, but structure is obeyed. So if you want justice, you do not scream, you do not complain, you do not beg. You learn the machine, then you turn it. And that is exactly why this moment feels less like tribute and more like a decades-long score being settled in perfect silence. But William alone could not do it. Vision is one thing. Execution is another. That is where Princess Anne entered like the monarchy's iron shadow. Anne has long carried a reputation inside royal circles as the one person who values duty over vanity, order over noise, results over performance. She does not need headlines, she does not need approval, she needs the job done. And insiders know that when Anne quietly supports something, doors open without appearing to move. Suddenly procedures become smooth. Suddenly resistance disappears. Suddenly the impossible starts looking inevitable. Together, William brought the mission. Anne brought the machinery. He had the emotional reason. She had the institutional weaponry. That combination should have worried everyone, because once those two forces aligned, this stopped being symbolic. It became operational. Reports suggest approvals moved discreetly, schedules were arranged carefully, sensitive areas were managed without drawing attention, and every procedural detail was tightened until there was no crack left for anyone to force open later. No drama, no leaks, no noise, just progress, ruthless progress. And then comes the most shocking part of all. Queen Camilla reportedly stood outside the core of this process, not accidentally, not because someone forgot to update her, not because of confusion, but because distance itself may have been part of the design. Imagine realizing something massive is happening in your own institution only after it is too late to stop it. Imagine discovering the train left the station long before you even knew tracks were being built. That is the kind of cold exclusion that stings louder than any public insult. By the time the palace atmosphere began to shift, insiders suggest the real decisions had already been made. The ending had already been written. The signatures, approvals, positioning, timing, all reportedly locked in place before objections could even be formed. This is what makes the story so chilling. Nobody needed to fight openly because the battle was allegedly won before anyone knew war had started. Then came the moment that sent whispers through royal memory itself. Inside the Hall of Matriarchs, a space tied to legacy, status, and how the monarchy chooses to remember its women, a silence dating back decades was suddenly broken. For years, one absence haunted that space: Diana, Princess of Wales. A woman too loved to erase, too iconic to replace, too powerful in memory to truly disappear. Since 1997, that gap had lingered like a wound dressed in velvet. Then, without warning, it changed. Diana's portrait was reportedly brought forward and placed not in some corner, not in some token side position, not hidden politely in the background, but exactly where many believed it always should have stood, beside Queen Elizabeth II. Let that sink in. Beside the longest reigning monarch, the symbol of continuity herself. That placement did not whisper. It thundered. It said Diana was not a footnote, not an inconvenience, not a tragic chapter to be politely managed. It said she belongs in the central story of the crown. And the most unsettling detail? It reportedly did not feel temporary. No sense of trial run, no sense of maybe later this changes, no sense of symbolic gesture for headlines. It felt final, permanent, anchored. The kind of move designed so carefully that reversing it later would create more shock than leaving it in place. That is how true power works. It makes reversal look more costly than surrender. Those who understand palace politics know portrait placement is never just decoration. It is narrative. It is hierarchy. It is memory turned into architecture. Every frame tells future generations who mattered, who lasted, who shaped the institution, which means this was never just about hanging a picture. It was about restoring a legacy that some believed had been sidelined for years. It was about forcing history to look at itself in the mirror. And somewhere in those corridors, as the air changed and the silence thickened, one terrifying question likely began to spread. If Diana has returned to the heart of royal memory, who exactly made that possible? And what else are they planning next? What happened next may have been even more explosive than the placement itself, because power is never measured by titles alone. It is measured by what happens when someone tries to stop something. And according to the unfolding whispers around Windsor Castle, the exact timing of this operation was as strategic as the decision itself. During the crucial final phase, Queen Camilla was reportedly away on scheduled royal duties, occupied with public commitments that looked ordinary on paper and harmless in appearance. Yet while she remained elsewhere, the machinery inside Windsor allegedly reached completion. By the time she was in position to respond, the atmosphere had already changed. The decision had moved from plan to reality, from discussion to fact, from vulnerable to untouchable. That is where the emotional shock reportedly began. Imagine returning to discover that something symbolic, historic, and deeply personal to the internal balance of the monarchy had already been finalized without your influence shaping the result. Reports describe an immediate wave of disbelief followed by anger, then urgency. Questions were raised, explanations demanded, meetings requested. The instinct was clear: contain it, challenge it, reverse it. But here is the detail sending chills through royal watchers. The system allegedly did not bend. No emergency reopening, no sudden review, no pause button, no visible panic, just a wall of quiet finality. For decades, influence inside royal structures often worked through access, relationships, and timing. But this moment suggested something had shifted beneath the surface. Requests, no matter how urgent, reportedly met firm refusal. Channels that once responded seemed closed. Doors that once opened seemed still. And when institutions stop reacting the way they always have, it usually means the power map has already been redrawn. This was not simply someone losing an argument. It looked more like someone discovering the rules had changed while they were still playing the old game. And then the shadow of 1997 returned. Because for Prince William, this story was never only about a portrait. It was about a promise no cameras could record. The world remembers the image of a 15-year-old boy walking behind his mother Diana's coffin. But what the world could not see was whatever formed inside him that day. Grief changes people. Public grief changes them even more. Some collapse under it. Some run from it. Others become patient, calculating, determined never to let memory be managed by others again. If this moment truly traces back to that loss, then Windsor was not witnessing a sudden move. It was witnessing the last chapter of a vow carried for decades. Sources within the transcript describe years of quiet preparation, learning palace systems, understanding protocols, studying how legacy is preserved, and identifying how permanent change happens inside institutions that hate sudden change. That is the genius of it. William did not storm the gates. He learned where the hinges were. He did not attack tradition. He reportedly used tradition itself. Every rule reviewed, every historical precedent understood, every formal requirement satisfied. It is hard to oppose a move when the move follows your own rules better than you do. But even the sharpest long-term strategy still needed one final force: Princess Anne. If William carried the emotional engine, Anne carried the cold steel frame. Her role appears less sentimental and more surgical. Timing had to be exact, access had to be controlled, personnel had to be positioned, risks had to be removed before they became obstacles. She allegedly treated the entire operation not as a tribute, but as a correction. And that single framing changes everything. A tribute can be debated. A correction feels necessary. A tribute can be delayed. A correction demands completion. When Diana's portrait was finally positioned within the Hall of Matriarchs, those present reportedly understood the weight instantly. No applause needed, no speech required. Some moments are louder when nobody speaks. The placement beside Queen Elizabeth II carried a message the institution would understand immediately. Diana was not outside the story. She was central to it, not temporarily remembered, permanently restored. And if Anne indeed confirmed that Diana belonged there, then it was less a comment than a seal pressed into wax. Final, cold, unarguable. Then came perhaps the most fascinating layer of all, King Charles III, because when pressure rose, many would expect intervention from the highest level, a reversal, a compromise, at minimum hesitation. Instead, according to the transcript, there was silence. But royal silence is rarely empty. Silence can mean refusal to fight. Silence can mean acceptance. Silence can mean recognizing that resisting would create greater damage than allowing change to stand. If so, then Charles did not need to announce anything. By not acting, he may have confirmed everything. That silence may have done what no statement could. It transformed a controversial move into settled reality. Once the highest authority declines to challenge something, opposition weakens instantly. Momentum hardens. The debate shifts from should this happen to how do we live with what already happened. And that is when power truly changes shape, not with shouting, but with the disappearance of resistance. Afterward, the ripple effects reportedly spread through the wider monarchy. Catherine, Princess of Wales, appeared increasingly central in areas long associated with Diana's public image: children, emotional well-being, compassion-led service, community visibility. Meanwhile, Camilla's role was not dramatically erased, but subtly repositioned. Less about public humiliation, more about controlled redistribution of symbolic attention. In royal life, that can matter even more, because crowns survive on optics as much as law. And when optics move, reality often follows later. So what was this really? Revenge? Restoration? Strategic succession politics? A son honoring his mother? A princess enforcing institutional order? A king choosing silence over conflict? Maybe it was all of them at once. That is what makes the story so dangerous. It cannot be reduced to one motive. It sits at the crossroads of grief, memory, image, inheritance, and power. And now the most haunting question remains. If one carefully timed move could restore Diana to the heart of royal memory and quietly shift internal influence without a public war, then what other changes are already being prepared behind those palace walls right now, hidden beneath the same polished silence?